At 22:16 hours, we got a call that a man was acting wildly in the store. It took us a while to control the situation. We've had 3 incidences this week. They're annoying.
What have we got?
105 North Avenue 52.
Good evening, my darling batlings. As an older millennial, it's weird to think about that brief period in the mid to late 90s when everyone, and I mean everyone, was trying to create their own attitude-filled mascot. Nintendo, of course, had Mario, Sega had Sonic, but by 1996, there was a new player in town that sought to dominate the console gaming space, Sony, with their original PlayStation. Flash forward to 2024, and PlayStation is a household name, but the same can't be said for its unofficial mascot. First there was Super Mario, then came Sonic the Hedgehog, then 1996 comes around, small-time developers Naughty Dog partnered up with Universal Interactive and Sony to release their own entry into the booming mascot platformer market, Crash Bandicoot. Yes, that's the same Naughty Dog that's known today for their award-winning, prestigious franchise that sought to bring a new sense of maturity to the video game landscape, Way of the Warrior. Cue the talking skull.
Hearken ye, for I tell a tale known to precious few, and extend a challenge to
Crash Bandicoot's a unique story in that, unlike so many of its contemporaries, it not only succeeded critically and financially on release, but became the de facto game series associated with the PlayStation, alongside other classics like Tomb Raider and Resident Evil, solidifying its place at the top of the PlayStation mascot pile. But today, the future of the series looks uncertain at best and bleak at worst. Now, I'm someone who grew up with the original PlayStation Crash saga, but gradually moved on to other things once the PS2, GameCube, Xbox generation rolled in, so I don't have much, if any, experience with the later Crash Bandicoot entries up until the revival in the late 2010s, with the Crash N. Sane trilogy and Crash Bandicoot 4. My goal throughout this series of reviews is to look at each Crash game in the context of when it was developed and released, judge whether it holds up well enough today to earn my recommendation, and hopefully by the end of this journey, have a more complete understanding of Crash Bandicoot as a whole. Let's get started. I'm not going to spend much time on the history behind Crash Bandicoot because, honestly, it's pretty self-explanatory. Naughty Dog saw the popularity of mascot platformers playing Follow the Leader with Sonic the Hedgehog, saw that the new Sony PlayStation had a mascot vacancy, and dove headfirst into developing what would eventually become Crash Bandicoot. What's interesting to note is that they decided on making a 3D platformer, which was an unexplored territory at the time. Remember, Crash Bandicoot came out only a few months after Nintendo's take on the genre, Super Mario 64, so they wouldn't have anything concrete enough to build their mechanics and design around. This game was heavily promoted by Sony as one of their key releases for 1996, and with an attitude-filled marketing blitz so emblematic of the mid-90s. They were keen on selling this game and the Crash Bandicoot character on his personality first and foremost, which is masterfully displayed as soon as you boot the game up. This opening right here, with Crash running up to the screen, getting spooked by the title crashing down, looking around suspiciously, it tells you all you need to know about who Crash is. That is, a goofball. Wait a few seconds on the title screen and you'll get the game's backstory. Dr. Neo Cortex and his assistant, Dr. Nitrous Brio, are creating an army of mutant animals to conquer the world, with Crash meant to be their army's general. However, when he's run through the brainwashing and intelligence-boosting Cortex Vortex device, the machine malfunctions and Crash escapes. With his test subject gone, Cortex prepares to use Plan B, Crash's girlfriend, Tawna. It's up to Crash to find his way back to Cortex's lab, save Tawna, and stop the Mad Doctor's plans for global conquest. It's a pretty basic setup, only slightly more complex than your average Mario story of the time, but it's effective at introducing our hero, our villain, and our goal. 3 key elements that any good platformer needs to get you invested in completing the hero's journey. When you start the game, you're shown a map screen, giving you a visual indicator of where your adventure starts, as well as how far you have to go to save the day, as well as making the game setting feel like a real, lived-in place. Starting off on the beaches of Insanity Island, progressing through the jungles and native villages, crossing rivers and bridges, before making your way to Cortex's castle filled with machinery and devoid of nature entirely. It's a great method of visual storytelling without having to bring the game to a halt with cutscenes. The environments you travel through, they're lush and vibrant and disguise the fact that, in essence, every level's just a narrow hallway or occasional side-scroller with 1 or 2 side paths for extra goodies. The character models for Crash and his foes are simple, but hold up well enough when paired with the rest of the game's visual style, foregoing advanced character textures so more processing power can be dedicated to rendering the environments with minimal load times. The game natively displays in a 512 by 240 aspect ratio, with areas of the vertical resolution left intentionally blank to ensure a consistent frame rate, since this area of the screen normally wouldn't be displayed on a consumer-grade CRT TV of the era. I've taken the liberty of correcting it in post to a more standard 4:3 aspect ratio, while cropping out the blank space, which is how you would normally see it on old TV. It runs at a pretty stable frame rate that I estimate's around 30 frames per second, with the only noticeable slowdown occurring when multiple explosions go off at once. Performance and appearance-wise, it's above average for a relatively early PS1 game, managing to look gorgeous and stand out from the competitors without sacrificing a stable frame rate. The music's also not half bad either, if a bit on the repetitive side. Composer Josh Mansell clearly wanted to capture the Australian island setting with the choices of instruments and rhythms he uses, mainly relying on marimbas, bongos, and the occasional horn section. The compositions are catchy and upbeat, even in the more dark and foreboding areas like the 2 ruin levels or the later areas of Cortex's lair. The standout tracks to me have to be the main theme, the hog riding theme, the ruins theme, and Dr. Cortex's theme. I wouldn't rank this as one of the best soundtracks in the series at the moment, if only because Mansell would continue to improve his craft over the next few games, making this soundtrack feel more quaint and basic in comparison. The best way to sum up the gameplay is, well, I think Brady from Nitro Rad's review of Crash 4 summed it up perfectly. It's your typical side-scrolling platformer, but instead of the camera always focusing head-on, it's placed behind Crash's back. You have 8 directions to move in, limited to the D-pad only as the DualShock hadn't launched yet, a jump, and a spin attack. The spin is used for breaking the many crates scattered throughout the more than 30 stages, as well as attacking enemies. Hitting an enemy with a spin or a jump is immediately satisfying thanks to the choice of sound effects offering some nice feedback to the player. I'll never get over that awesome ricochet sound when you knock an enemy all the way into the background, and God, it's just great. Your main goal is simply to reach the end of each stage, marked by a warp pad. If you want to ramp up the challenge, though, you can go for the stage's hidden gem, which requires you to break every crate in the stage while getting to the end in only 1 life. Now, while later games would refine the gem system to make it more comfortable to complete, here I find it to be unnecessarily difficult, due to not only the zero death requirement, but a few quirks in the level design and controls. Despite jumping being a key part of Crash's moveset, Crash is heavy and stiff to control in the air, with no easy way to correct yourself if you mistime or misjudge a jump. Crash also dies in only one hit, assuming you don't break open one of the Aku Aku crates in the level, which grants you a one-hit shield with 1 Aku Aku mask collected, 2 hits with 2 collected, and temporary invincibility and increased speed with 3 collected. Crash's fragile nature, coupled with some occasionally spotty collision detection, stiff movement in the air, and surprisingly stiff diagonal movements in the handful of stages where you run away from a boulder Indiana Jones style, make completing a stage in one life a far more difficult task than you'd expect going in. And then you remember that you have to break every single crate along the way in order to get the gem, which some stages make impossible on purpose without collecting one of the colored gems locked away in the game's hardest stages to open a hidden pathway with extra crates. And what do you get for going after the gems in the first place? The ability to save your progress. This right here. This is where the game's challenge becomes unbalanced for me. Yes, you can also save by collecting 3 Tawna bonus tokens in a stage and completing the associated bonus round, but those only appear in predetermined levels, and if you fail the bonus stage, which is easier than you might think because despite being strictly 2D, you're not limited to 2D movement and can simply fall off the foreground or background, meaning that gems will be your most consistent way of saving your progress if you can manage to collect them on a regular basis. Lose all your lives, and you're sent back to the map screen, which is thankfully less brutal than, say, Mega Man Legends or Resident Evil, but still bizarre choice to make the act of saving your game so you can continue later locked behind an optional collectible or a limited supply of bonus rounds. Thankfully, as if to offset this, Crash Bandicoot can be beaten in a couple of hours for a non-completionist run, and the game practically showers you with extra lives either through collecting 100 of the many Wumpa fruit laid everywhere in the levels, or by collecting a 1-up icon. In between new areas of the world map, you'll face off with a boss sent by Cortex to halt Crash's progress. These, unfortunately, are nothing to write home about, and all come down to basic pattern recognition. The only one that gave me any trouble was the fight against Embryo, and that was only due to the slime monsters you have to jump on to damage him in the first place having some unclear hitboxes. Eventually, after wiping out Cortex's minions and destroying his lab, you'll face off with the Mad Doctor himself as he tries to escape on his blimp. He's pathetically easy, just knock the green laser blast back at him while dodging the others and he'll go down in no time. With Cortex defeated, Crash saves Tawna, and the two fly off into the sunset as Cortex Castle burns and the credits roll. Alternatively, if you either went to the effort of collecting every single gem, or if you're like me, put in the 100% completion password, you get an extended version of the penultimate stage, the Great Hall. Normally this level is over in a few seconds due to the exit being directly across from the entrance, but if you collected all the gems, you can ride in, hop across them to reach a secret room where Tawna seems to have escaped on her own and waits there for Crash to fly off with her on a bird. This lets you skip the final boss fight entirely, and nets you a comedic "Where Are They Now" montage telling you what happened to each of the villains after the game ends. So all in all, I think that while the original Crash Bandicoot is a standout title for the time it came out in, the many improvements and refinements made not just throughout the 3D platforming space, but even the game's own follow-ups makes it more of a curiosity to check out if you either want to start the series at its humble beginnings, or if you want to see how the PlayStation's first 3D platformer holds up for yourself. You can thankfully find this game for relatively cheap secondhand, but I'd actually recommend playing it on emulator, as having the luxury of saving when you want to, and not only when the game allows you to, makes it more welcoming to newcomers. As I stated earlier, Crash Bandicoot was a smash success when it came out in late 1996, and almost immediately, Naughty Dog went to work on a sequel due to release a year later. Next time, we'll take a look at the second entry of the Naughty Dog trilogy, Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back. I've been Arikado, thanks for watching, and until next time, unpleasant dreams. Oh, and I'll try not to take a whole year to make the next video, I promise!